So that's out of the way. I know that there's several of you here for cultural events credit, and I'm just thrilled that you have chosen this particular session to get cultural events credit. Before I introduce today's speaker, I'm going to ask Lexi Sharp, who is a system in the BSW programming this semester, to talk a little bit about what is expected of you in order to receive cultural events credits. These are not my rules, my friends. These are the rules from the Cultural Events Office. So I'm gonna ask Lexi to jump in and explain what is expected of you. Lexi?
Yes. Hi, guys. My name is Lexi Sharp, and I am the graduate assistant for the Bachelor of Social Work department. So for the cultural event, in order to receive credit, you do need to have your camera on the entire time. We will be scrolling through quite often, so having your camera on and you not sitting in front of it is not going to count as attendance, so please make sure you're attentive. As usual, if you were in an event in person, we'd ask you to refrain from using other devices as cell phones or computers. I know it's tempting having it open, but please don't work on your homework while we're doing this session. At the end of the session, I will drop a survey in the chat box for attendance, so please fill that out. And then there's also a way for us to take attendance on Zoom with a user report. So we will send that in, as well as a list of any students who do not have their cameras on or walk away from the camera or it is disabled. Because of virtual technology, please bear with us if something does not work and be patient. We have not used this survey before, so hopefully it will go on without a hitch, but we will work through it all together. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lexi. And this, I don't know if I said, but my name is Dr. Monique Constance Huggins, in case you're wondering who is this person. Yes, that's me. And again, we are so delighted to have you at our first wrap session on TARE, adjusting to the fall semester. And we are indeed privileged, beyond privileged, to have such to have expertise within our department to talk about a multitude of topics. But today we have expertise in Professor Sarah Hopkins, and I'm going to share a little bit about Professor Hopkins for you. Sarah Hopkins is an instructor in the social work department at Winthrop University. She earned her BS in Human Development from Binghamton University and her master's degree in social work from Binghamton University in 2006. Now, prior to coming to Winthrop, Ms. Hopkins started Binghamton University in the College of Community and Public Affairs, primarily in social work department, but also taking on class assignments in the Human Development and Student Affairs programs. Now, she has a decade worth of direct practice experience working as a licensed medical social worker in hospice and home care, with latter half being exclusively in bereavement counseling. Ms. Hopkins is very passionate about working with grief and loss, and feels that is, something that society often overlooks, and believes in being a resource to community agencies and organizations as a support for loss and change. In social work education, Ms. Hopkins believes in developing the whole student. Due to this belief, she incorporates self-care practices into the classroom, making sure students develop and engage self-care practice prior to becoming practitioners. Through this incorporation, Ms. Hopkins hopes to help develop social workers, but not just social workers, whom are less apt to experience professional burnout. And so with that, my friends, please help me welcome Professor Hopkins to our first wrap session.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces on the call today. It kind of upsets me a little bit, because normally we'd be in a big conference room together and I'd be kind of bebopping all over the room saying hi to all of you and excited to see all of you, but I'm excited to see you in this setting. Especially, I think it shows a lot of dedication. I don't know, if I was a student at this point and it was a Thursday and it was rainy like this at 11 o'clock, I'm not sure I'd be dedicated enough to get up for this. So I give you lots and lots of credit. As Dr. Huggins said, my name is Sarah Hopkins. I teach here in the social work department at Winthrop. I'm just starting my 3rd year. My husband was teasing me as I drove to campus today. I am from upstate New York, as Dr. Huggins talked about. I can do snow, I understand snow, I'll drive in the worst of snow, but mention the word hurricane or tropical storm, and I get a little nervous and jerky. So he's like, are you gonna be okay driving to campus? I said, yeah, I think I'll be fine. And of course I hydroplaned a little bit, but I was fine. I am here, there is not wind, it is just rain, as everyone keeps telling me. But anyways, today we are here to talk about tier adjusting to the fall semester. So we're going to go on a little bit of a journey together today, and I am going to ask some open-ended questions throughout the presentation. Rather than unmuting yourself and answering vocally, what I'm going to have you do, just so we can hear many different voices, is I'll ask that you answer the open-ended questions in the chat, and then at the end of the presentation, it is my hope that we'll have some time to have some dialogue during which you'll be able to unmute. So I want to take us back to March 16th, 2020. We received an email similar to this. This is the email that faculty and staff received. And my guess is, as students, you received a very similar email. You know, dear campus community, and basically the president writing to us to let us know that we were going to be closing down because of the pandemic. I ask you all to just go back in time, to go back to that day in March and remember what it felt like for you to receive this email. What I can share from my perspective that day is things felt very, very chaotic. I actually heard that we were closing from students before I heard from the email from the president. A lot of information was coming in. Information was coming in different ways. Social media had information, faculty had information, students had information. And I can remember myself trying to sort through, what did this mean? What did this mean for myself as an instructor for the rest of the semester? What did it mean for the students that I was teaching, the classes that I was teaching? I'm also a mom. What did it mean for my 2 small children who were in school at the time? What did it mean for everyone? And I just remember I felt completely overwhelmed and unsure. And I couldn't think back to a prior experience that I had had that I could compare this to. Typically when something happens in life, I have some similar experience that I can relate it to. And for this one, I wasn't able to recall an experience that I could really relate it to. Do those feelings sound similar to anyone else in the room? Did anyone have similar experiences when they first received this communication? And again, use the chat, yes, no, etc. I see lots of yeses. Yes, I was scared. No idea what was going on. Thank you. Okay. So what we're going to do today, and those of you who have had me in class, those of you who have come to other presentations that I've done along the way, this is a model that I continually go back to. Again, I've worked with hospice for over a decade now. More recently, I'm involved with hospice and community care here in Rock Hill and doing some grief and loss work with our local Rock Hill School District. And I keep going back to this tier model of grief. And it's J. William Wardens, who's a psychologist from the medical school at Harvard. This is the model that he uses, and it's called the 4 tasks of mourning. The T is to accept the reality of the loss. And really that day in March, I think we were all trying to grapple with, okay, right now we know we have the loss of the physical campus closing. What does that mean? And are more losses, at least my mind as a hospice social worker, as someone who very much is involved with grief, my mind kept going back to what other losses are we all going to go through because of the loss of physical campus closing. E, he talks about experiencing the pain of loss. A, he talks about adjusting to a life without the person. Because again, he wrote this model for someone who's grieving the death of a loved one. But what I've found in the grief and loss work that I've done is this model can really be used with any type of loss. And for me, it makes a lot of sense and helps to ground me and make more sense, or make the loss that I'm going through not easier, because I don't necessarily think loss is ever easy, but it makes it more manageable. It makes me feel like I can put my hands on it and I can understand it a bit deeper. And then R is to reinvest in the new reality. Today, really the goal of the presentation is to really get into that adjustment. How are you adjusting to this semester that's very, very different? And how are you reinvesting? But in order to get to that A and that R piece, we have to go through the T and E first before we do that. So T, to accept the reality of the loss. Before we can even really talk about loss, we need to define what is loss. If I asked you to define loss, how would you define loss? And again, go ahead and throw it out in the chat. What does loss mean to you? And I'm not grading you. Dr. Huggins is not grading you. I think I saw Dr. Sellers in here too. None of us are grading you. Pain, not having what you're used to having, something you no longer have. I know I have lots of grief and loss students who are taking the death class right now. They should have the definition down pat. Confused, changed, a negative change, something that you can never get back. No grading. I know, Wendy, no grading. The feeling of missing something, something that has been taken away from you, something that is missing. Absence of norm. Yeah, you're all hitting the nail on the head. And really the way that Worden defines loss is a loss can be a person, place, thing, or a circumstance. What is missing? What is different? What is outside of the norm for you? So I want you to take a second, and if you have a scrap piece of paper next to you, or just think about it, and I want you to think about what losses have you personally experienced since March 16th, since we received that email, March 16th, 2020. What losses have you experienced? And it doesn't just have to be the loss related to COVID, but any losses that you've experienced since then. I'm intentionally giving you a few seconds here to really think about it. Some of you are sharing in the chat too. If you want to share in the chat, feel free to do that as well as you're writing down. You see in connection with friends, hanging out with teammates, lack of support, finances, connection with people, job, motivation, stability. Yeah, sanity. Oh, sanity is a big one. Oh, and it's Becca that says it. Yes. Finances, job, security, connecting, visiting parents. Yeah. Death of a family member, financial, graduation from undergrad. Yeah. Yep. And look at how many of the same losses keep coming up over and over again. Thank you for sharing all those. As we go through today though, I want us to remember it's not just COVID that we've been going through since March 2020. Really, it's been two pandemics that we've really been grappling with. We've really been grieving. Certainly COVID, since everything was shut down in March, but then since everything's been shut down in March, look at the racial injustices. And certainly the racial injustices are nothing new, but they've been intensified since things have been shut down in March 2020. And as some of you have shared, you're missing that connection. And I don't know about all of you, but when major things are happening, especially major injustices are happening, I know that I really navigate and move towards my social work family, my friends who I know who have similar views to myself. And I've really missed those connections where I can say things and I can talk about things out loud in brave, safe spaces where I know what I'm saying is not going to be judged and people are going to help me to process what's going on. But I think for a lot of us, we've been left on our own to process really deep and really heavy things when it comes to the more recent racial injustices as well, which is intensifying the grief. Right now, it's kind of this cumulative loss and grief experience, that it's loss on top of loss on top of loss. And a lot of people know that they're grieving, and even some people don't know that they're grieving. They know that something with their mental wellness is off, and they haven't even been able to label it as grief. They know that something is going on inside of them, but they haven't had the opportunity to talk with others about it. So it's my hope on the front end of the presentation today, I'm able to validate some of the feelings and the experiences that you've had over the last several months. And again, here's some of the other losses that you've all mentioned that you've gone through. I know for myself, traveling right now, you know, being from New York, typically over the summer, we'd make a trip up to New York to see friends and family, to see my parents, to see everyone before the semester starts. I am not allowed to go to New York right now. I am on the naughty list living in South Carolina. I could get in trouble. I could get fined. I can't go see those family and friends unless I seek out permission within the executive order to make the trip. Certainly some of you mentioned high school graduation or undergrad graduation. Some of you had graduations, and this is a picture from the Rock Hill schools. You had graduations, but they looked very, very different than what you were used to, than that picture that you had in your head, than those graduations of friends and families that you attended before you. Certainly finances was mentioned. That's a big one for a lot of people. Financial adjustments, and you know, what does that look like, and what do you need, and how do you keep going? And then of course, as was mentioned earlier, then the racial injustices that are happening along the way as well. With accepting the losses that we're going through, I'm a big fan of Maslow. I always go back to Maslow. Those of you that have had me in class, you know, time and time again, I just put up my little triangle, and you know where I'm going. You know I'm going down that Maslow path. Because for myself, before I became a social worker, I was an education major. And in social work and education, we are continually talking about Abrams Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. You need to understand that the sense of loss that you're feeling right now is real. And I know sometimes we get into this comparison. Well, my loss isn't that bad compared to other people. Don't compare right now. We are all going through loss. And I want you to look at the hierarchy of needs and think about where your hierarchy, where has it been disrupted since March? And there was a thing that was going on social media, a meme that I saw over and over again that was really, at first, I was judging myself when I saw it, and then the more I thought about it, I was really bothered by it. There was a meme that was going around that was saying, if you, during this pandemic, if during this time of isolation, you haven't started a new business or wrote a book or gotten a new hobby, you've done it wrong. And seeing that, I turned inward, and I'm like, am I wasting my time? Am I doing what, you know, I'm not finding anything new. In fact, I'm barely getting by. I don't know about some of you, but I'll disclose a little bit here. Some days, like, I was barely making it into the shower. I'd get up, maybe I'd get a workout in, then I'd be in my sweaty, gross workout clothes, but no one could smell me other than my family, and they have to love me irregardless. I was jumping on teaching, I was homeschooling, I was doing all of these things, and sometimes just eating and showering and sleeping, those basic needs, those were disrupted. So how can I get to self-actualization and achieve those higher level things if basic needs were being disturbed? Certainly safety needs, security, financial. Many of you mentioned those intimate relationships, friends, family, the connection, and we're going to talk a little bit more about human connection a little bit as well. And then even esteem needs. You know, a lot of you were still in school, you were still in classes, but I don't know about you, but myself, when I am a student, I need to be in the classroom, even presenting this way. It's really hard for me to present this way, and I could open up so I could see all of your faces, but when I present, I feed off of all of you. I want to check the pulse. I want to see, like, are you on the same page as I am, or am I way over here while you're way over there? So some of those esteem needs and feeling accomplished, I've done a lot of presentations that just have felt flat. or sitting here at my desk and teaching class, it doesn't give me the energy that it would if I'm in front of you, watching you learn and having those aha moments. So I really want you to take some time and reflect upon, how have your basic needs been disrupted? And just be easy on yourself, because you have all navigated losses through this. Warden talks about is the E, the experiencing the pain of the loss. And again, in my experience, in no way am I an expert on grief. I really hate when people say, oh, Sarah, she's a grief expert. No, I'm not an expert on grief. I've worked with a lot of folks who are grieving. I've had a lot of personal grief myself, and I have a lot of experience with it, but I am not an expert. I will never be an expert on it, because grief is a very subjective experience. But in the experiences that I've had with working with a lot of folks, being able to be side by side on their journeys of grief, what I have learned is that a lot of people will do anything they can to run away from pain. Most people, when pain gets to be too much, whether it's physical or emotional, they will numb, they will shut down, and they will avoid, and they will do anything they can to not go through that pain. And what I have found is with grief, in order to work with it, you have to go through it and not around it. And so many folks, when it comes to grief, because it is so painful, they want to numb it, and or they want to go around it. And especially as young adults, especially as college students, there's a lot of different ways that you can numb pain. There are a lot of socially acceptable ways to numb pain. There's alcohol if you're 21, even if you're not 21, let's be honest. There are drugs, there is food, there is shopping, there is gambling, there are a lot of different, there is Netflix, there is avoidance. There are a lot of ways to distract and numb. Some of those things can also be used momentarily and for periods of time to give yourself a break from the grief, but it's a very fine line of when are you numbing and when are you just taking a break from the pain. And again, we'll talk some more about that when we get into the adjusting and the reinvesting. So I don't know how many of you follow NAMI online. NAMI has done a really good job since the pandemic of putting up a lot of really good articles and just a lot of good materials on their social media feed. So if you don't follow NAMI, I encourage you to follow NAMI. It's a National Alliance of Mental Illness. And they had an article up recently, and it was actually published through Self Magazine, but it was written by Dr. Gold, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. And she talked about these 17 normal feelings to have as a college student right now. So I'm going to read through these with you, and I just want to see how many of them really speak to you. And as I read through it, if it speaks to you, why don't you just put the chat in the number. So number one is you're struggling with uncertainty. How many of you feel like you are struggling with uncertainty right now? I don't know about you, but uncertainty right now, like, I'm still waiting to find the rhythm of the semester. Next week is week 5, week 5. We're a third of the way through. I don't have a rhythm down. Am I asynchronous? Am I synchronous? Am I in my office? Am I at my house? What am I doing? What day is it? Uncertainty is everywhere. Number 2, you're exhausted. I don't know about all of you, but some days I get done with work and I can't tangibly tell you what I've done with my day or how I spent my time, but I'm exhausted. And what I know for myself is that sitting all day is far more exhausting than getting up and moving. And again, we'll talk about some of these with the adjustment and the reinvestment. 3, you're grieving the loss of your identity. Who are you and what do you want to do moving forward? What roles do you play right now? And some of you with job loss and with changing, what you're doing in school, and even some of you who are close to graduation, you might be grappling with, okay, if I graduate in a COVID world, what does that mean for me job-wise? And I know a lot of our MSW students who graduated in the spring, I'm doing a lot of references for them, and they're so frustrated. They're like, I thought I'd graduate, I'd have all these opportunities, and everything is just taking forever right now. 4, you're anxious about how all of this will affect your future, relating to 3. 5, some of you mentioned you're really concerned about money. I hope you're watching this chat just to see that you're not alone with these. 6, you're worried about your own health. There were many times, I don't know how about all of you, but I would wake up and I think a lot of it was allergies. And I would say to my husband, oh my gosh, I think I have COVID. I need to go get tested. Thankfully, my husband's a paramedic and he knows that I can be a little bit over the top sometimes. He's like, why don't you go take an allergy pill? Let me take your temperature. And if you still don't feel better later, then we can go get you checked out. Bless him. I'm not quite sure how he stood by me through all this. 7, you're frustrated by all of the rules and limitations. How many of you have gotten out of the car to go somewhere and you had to go back because you've forgotten a mask? Or you've gone to go shopping and you forgot what time something is opened? Or you just want to go to the gym and you want to work out? Or, as some of you mentioned, you want to go see friends and families. Number 8, I think this is a big one for a lot of you. You're dealing with a ton of FOMO about everything. And FOMO, for those of you in the room who may not know what that is fear of missing out. That can be a big one. Something really funny that happened in New York not that long ago is New York has this long list, I forget how many it is right now, of states that cannot travel to New York unless they quarantine for 2 weeks. So Maryland was on that list. So a big vacation spot for New Yorkers in the summer where I'm from in upstate is Ocean City, Maryland. So everyone's talking about how their trips were canceled, and it was very interesting. For about 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, Maryland came off of the list. Everyone all of a sudden on social media, everyone's pictures were in Ocean City, Maryland. And it's like everyone got their vacation in, and now all of a sudden Maryland is back on the list. But looking at where people are going, and then I think grappling with oh, well, I didn't go anywhere, I didn't do anything, but I'm concerned about my health, but I want to follow the rules, but I'm missing out. So again, they all tie together. 9, you're questioning whether you deserve to be sad or to grieve. And again, that's where the comparison comes in. And I want to validate, you are allowed to be sad. You are allowed to grieve the loss of normalcy. Just because you look at someone else and you may say, well, you know, they've had a death in the family, or they've had this, or they've had that, that doesn't disvalidate or invalidate the grief that you're experiencing. So be easy on yourselves and let yourself go through it. 10, you're more content than usual and maybe guilty about it. I have some friends that are loving this time away from people. They tend to be more introverted. They're like, I will stay home forever. I am in my happy place. I am with my animals. And look at all these 10s. Yeah. And there's been moments of it that I'm like, you know what? I'm spending more family time. I'm spending more quality time. And even my friends back in New York, friends who I have not had time to talk to, I'm more connected to my friends in New York than I have been since I've moved, because we're not racing around the way that we typically are. 11, you're unable to concentrate or get as much done as you used to. That, my friends, is grief brain. The most common grief symptom that I have seen over the years of people is this inability to concentrate and just lack of focus. Because you are grieving, you are using a lot of energy grieving. So the things that you typically would do on autopilot, you have to really focus and concentrate to do. And my guess is you're doing things in different places and in different ways than you have before. So you're adjusting to that as well. Just this morning, I was working on this presentation, trying to get things done at home. My kids are hybrid, so it was their home day. So I'm listening to my husband try to fight with the two of them about their work. And then my daughter came to sit down next to me, and I'm trying to teach her of how to write extended form numbers with exponents. And I'm just like, I can't even think about this right now. 12, you're upset with friends who have conflicting views. None of you have friends with conflicting views on anything right now, right? Yeah, 12 is a big one. And right now, I don't know about all of you, but the nation, the world just feels very, very divisive. Like there is no middle ground. There are extremes with everything all over the place. Yes, family too, Delia. Family can be a big one, and we'll talk about that. 13, you're fearing judgment about your own decisions. I know I have had my moments. My family, I will admit, we went down to North Myrtle Beach with my sister and her boyfriend for about 5 days. And I was like, I don't know if I want to put anything out there on social media. I don't know, what people are going to say about it. So I was kind of quiet about it, but I know that I did what I needed to do to keep my family safe, but I know that we needed to go away. And Dr. Sellers just mentioned, yeah, especially with Black Lives Matter and with the elections coming up, there is huge divisiveness. And unfortunately, the pandemic is very much getting turned into politics as well. 14, you're concerned about your eating or drinking habits. I was joking with Dr. Huggins before I got here, like I literally got to my office about 10 minutes before this started because I was on my spin bike at home, bought a used spin bike, downloaded the Peloton app. I was on my spin bike till 10:05 this morning. 10:05, I got off, I showered quickly. Thankfully, I live really, really close because my eating habits through all of this, I am an emotional eater anyways, but through all of this, like, especially right now, pumpkin season, give me all of that pumpkin sweetness. Every time I go to the grocery store and come home, my husband's like, who are you feeding? What are we doing? What is all of this? But food is just something that's comfort. I know I have other friends who they're like, well, every day is now the weekend, so what's one beer gonna hurt? Friends who have never, drank throughout the week, they're drinking more than ever. And yeah, Kirsten, that's absolutely a part of it. Some people in stress eat less. And I know some people with kind of the way that the days go, and I can go from extremes, and this is what happens a lot with grief, is you eat everything in sight, you eat nothing at all. And because the structure and routine of the day is lost, sometimes it's like, okay, well, what are my meal times and what did I used to eat? Because that routine is thrown away. 15, you're really, really, really ready to go back to campus, or you're really so excited that you're back here on campus. Yeah, I will admit the first couple of weeks here, and I don't know if Dr. Huggins and Dr. Sellers haven't been around as much, but I'm still coming into the office just because I can't get much done at home. I love my family, but I can't. The first couple of weeks being on campus without having students here, it felt so odd. Like there was no energy on campus. It just felt really, really flat. So having you all back, and something I'm doing for myself is just walking around campus. I'm very intentionally, and we'll talk about that, getting up and making sure I'm walking during the day, just seeing students on campus who are, being smart and socially distancing and wearing masks, just having that energy back. So I'm glad that you're all back. 16, you're feeling lonely as hell. Even if you are connecting with people, it's lonely. Or connecting via Zoom, connecting via FaceTime, talking on the phone. How many of you really miss hugs? Just that hug, just that human touch. Typically if I saw certain students as I'm walking around campus, like it'd be a hug or like a high five. And like there's moments where we see someone and like we have to like stop for a second. Like, oh wait, we can't do that. And I know even explaining that to my kiddos as they went back to school, saying like, you can't high five, you can't hug, like just know that adults and people still care about you. And then 17, the final one, you're concerned about your own mental health. And look at all of that. Look at how many of them, there's been moments there have been moments that my anxiety, I'm an anxious person by nature, but my anxiety has just been unbearable. And we'll talk about that. And at the end of this, I've definitely included some resources for folks to really dive into. And if you are not comfortable diving into those resources by yourself, you can reach out to me individually. If you know Dr. Huggins and not me, you can reach out to her. Certainly Dr. Sellers is on the call as well. If you have a relationship with her, you can reach out. If you're not one of our social work students, please reach out to someone here at Winthrop who you feel comfortable with to get some help. And we'll talk about those resources. So this was an April 2020 survey of 2,086 students, and this was put out by the Chronicle of Higher Education in May, and they talk about just the impact that it's had on students. In the survey, 91% of college students said that they were going through stress and anxiety, 81% disappointment or sadness, loneliness or isolation, 80%, financial setbacks about half, and relocation about half as well. So you are not alone. This is, hopefully it validates, and it's not a normal experience, but it's a cumulative experience. This is an experience that folks are sharing. It is not business as usual. So how do we best support ourselves and one another? And this is a new site that I learned about, again, through NAMI. I can't say enough about NAMI and the social media that they use, but I had not heard of this site before. It's For Like Minds. Have any of you heard of this site before, For Like Minds? It is an online peer support community dedicated to the recovery and wellness of people living with or supporting someone with mental illness, substance use, or a stressful life event. And this is an online survey of folks, and they were asked about COVID-19 and its impact on their wellness. So, and these were folks who had a mental illness pre-COVID. 64% feared that their condition would worsen. 12% felt that they were coping well. 68%, as you all said, felt that you were more isolated. And 57% felt less connected. Which again, if you have a pre-existing mental health concern going into this, chances are it's going to be exacerbated. If you don't have a mental illness going into this, chances are you are going to have increased anxiety. You may have increased sadness. And again, remember to reach out and to get counseling support. It doesn't mean you will be diagnosed with a mental illness per se, and it doesn't mean you have to have a pre-diagnosed mental illness to go into it. Absolutely, Willery, isolation plays a huge part for so many people. So just something to be aware of, that you are not alone in the feelings. So I want you to be vulnerable. This is one of Dr. Seller's favorites as well. One of my favorites, Brene Brown, is a social worker out of the University of Houston, Texas, and she is a researcher. How many of you know Brene? If you've had a class with me or Dr. Sellers, you know Brene, because we make you know Brene. You have no choice. Brene Brown talks a lot about shame and vulnerability. And this is one of my favorite quotes, and always will be. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. And I think it takes more to tell how we're doing and to show tears and to say, hey, I'm over here struggling and I need some help. Society for so long has told us just push through, just keep going, to be strong, you have to buck up and just, push on through. No. When we keep going and we push on through, all of that grief, all of that loss, all of those feelings bubble up, and eventually it's going to explode. So instead, talking about it as the feelings happen and as you're going through, and asking for help, not going it alone. And what happens too often is the iceberg of feelings. So the iceberg is what's outside of the water, the tip of the iceberg. And then underneath it, there are all of these feelings. I know for myself during the pandemic, a feeling that unfortunately I have displayed a lot is anger. I am very short with my family. I am very impatient with my family. We tend to, I don't know about you, but I tend to sometimes be the nastiest with those that I'm closest to, because I know that they love me unconditionally and will accept me in the end. But for me, what's underneath the iceberg is fear, anxiety, and frustration. And what I have to do, and I'm sure many of you have seen this before, is really looking at the feeling circle. And the feelings in the center of the circle, the mad, scared, joyful, powerful, peaceful, sad, and there's many variations of the feelings wheel. The feelings that are in the center of the circle are what are most common and what we're quickest to jump to. But then we have to reach out, and what are the feelings that we have? Oops, I'm trying to go backwards, not forwards. What are the feelings that we have underneath the water? And really digging in. And there's been many a days I've had to eat humble pie, especially with my husband, and go back and say, I'm sorry, I'm really anxious, I'm really nervous. I'm very much a type A personality. I like to plan things. I like to know how things are going. And right now, just so much feels out of my control that I'm very quick to jump to anger. Thank you for validating that, Madison, that I'm not alone in that. My guess is others of you are feeling that way. What are some of the feelings that you have really been feeling since March 20? Just go ahead, and your top feeling, the feeling that you probably have felt the most, go ahead and put it in the chat box. Frustration, scared, anger, anxiety, stress, frustration, stressed, anger. Survivor's guilt, stress, anxiety, stress, boredom, frustration. Yeah. I mean, look at it. Look at the common thread of these feelings. Okay. So since I'm getting close on time, as I always do, let's talk about the adjustment and the reinvestment. I just get so excited to talk about this stuff that I could just talk about it for hours and days. Yeah. So adjusting to a new life, and again, as Warden said, without the person, but we're adjusting to this new life living amongst these pandemics. And this, again, so the article in the Chronicle of Higher Education talked about grit versus grieving. If you had to define the word grit, how would you define grit? What does grit mean to you? Discipline, fortitude. We're using some synonyms now. Perseverance, sticking it out, resiliency. Do we see grit as a positive or a negative thing? Positive, hard work, hanging on, positive. Okay. So the official Merriam-Webster definition is courage and resolve and strength of character. How many of you have ever been told that, you know, grit would be a word to use to describe you? I know for me, grit has been a word that people will tell me, you know what, you have a lot of grit, Sarah. You just, life keeps handing you these losses and these circumstances and you just keep going. And, you know, I wish I had more grit. That's fine. But if you're all grit and you don't express the grief, that grit is going to catch up with you someday. So I just really encourage you to get out of your head this picture on the left where it's going to take a straight line. It's going to take all grit to keep going through, and let yourself, let this experience, let this semester be more of the right-hand side where you ask for help, where you try things on, where you really try those adjustments in order to get through, where you express the grief as it comes up. Because if not, it's going to come up at some point in your life. That is very true, Kirsten. When people know that about you, it sometimes makes you feel guilty when you do break that process. Yeah, absolutely. So with the adjustment, here's your return to learn. A huge adjustment, you know, coming back to campus is, you know, the mask ordinance and trying to stay 6 feet apart from people and what that looks like. I don't know about, you know, all of you, but adjusting and going places with the masks. There was one day I was in a local Walmart, and to go into Walmart in Rock Hill, you have to have your mask on. I think nationally, Walmart as a corporation has said, wear your mask. And I'm walking through and all of a sudden I look up and there's a man in front of me and he's wearing his mask, but he's wearing it like a mustache. His nose is out and his mouth is out. It's the first time I saw it like that. I've seen a lot of noses out, but it's the first time that I saw both the nose and the mouth. And it like startled me and I had to look away real quick. So I'm like, I just like stared at this man because I was just so like, and then I like walked away with my cart and I was being really judgy. I was being like really nasty in my head, thinking like, how dare you? And, you know, why can't you just wear a mask? And like this whole story was going on in my head. And then I thought about it later. And one thing that people have control over right now as they're making the adjustments is whether or not they wear the mask and how they wear the mask. And when we are going through loss and when we are grieving, people tend to take control of what they can. And in no way, when I say that, am I telling you not to wear your mask. Please wear your mask. Please, you know, keep following rules, keep yourself safe, keep others safe. But as you're looking at other people, friends, family, people around you, really consider with choices and things that they're doing, are they trying to take control of their life? And yeah, Amber, absolutely, especially when losses are happening, people want to take control of what they can. So if you're a returning student to LU, what is different this year? What adjustments have you had to make thus far? And I really love this quote when it comes to adjustments. When you can't change the direction of the wind, adjust your sails instead. I know some of the adjustments that I've seen is Zoom. I mean, here we are. Typically, we would be together in the classroom when you are together in some of the classrooms, but you're sitting apart, you have masks on, there's the cleaning spray, and thank you, Winthrop, for letting me steal pictures from your website and having so many good ones to use, and then wearing the mask. But what other adjustments have you had to make? Crystal says all of our classes are online, everything is virtual, wearing masks. Online half the time, then in person half the time. I had a student the other day who emailed me and she's like, Professor Hopkins, I'm gonna be late to class because I have one class that's now on campus and then I have your class 15 minutes later that's online and I have to go home in between and I'm gonna sign on for your class online as I drive home. And I'm like, wait a second, thank you for your dedication, thank you for your grit, but you need to be safe driving while you get home. If you can sign into the class before you start driving and set the phone down and not be distracted and listen, fine. Otherwise, please sign on to class 15 minutes late. So again, she was trying to display grit and really be accountable, where really, no, you driving safely hands-free and you getting home safely is far more important to me than you being signed on time for my class. So reaching out with these adjustments, because all of the classes look a little bit different. Virtual internship is different. Having to social distance when you hang out with friends. Yeah, you've made a lot of adjustments. Remember, as you're adjusting, information can be powerful and reduce uncertainty. I don't know about all of you, but when I am anxious and when I anticipate things, I go to the worst case scenario. When COVID first happened, my husband, as I mentioned, is a paramedic, so he was out working. I would wake up in the middle of the night in sheer panic. I would wake up and I would go on the Department of Health websites in South Carolina, in North Carolina, because that's where my sister lives, and then New York, because that's where a lot of my family and friends are. So not just one Department of Health website I was searching in the middle of the night, but 3. And in my head, I will put that information in the chat. Yeah, I had everyone's going to get it, everyone's going to get sick. So then I was up all night. And then I'm like, okay, yes, it's good to have this information, but what does it mean? Something that's happening next Thursday, a week from right now, is the Health Professionals Committee is doing a webinar on the science and health concerns of COVID. I will be giving brief information similar to this presentation, but a very condensed 10 to 15 minute presentation at the end. But Dr. Hamill is talking about it from the Education and PESH department. Dr. D from biology is talking about the science of it and talking about like what type of masks to wear, what masks work the best. And then Dr. Jackson from health management is talking as well about some psychological health. So you can get some more information about the science behind COVID as well. So for some of you who are more anxious about your health, this may be really good to attend. As well as, I don't know how many of you know this, I don't know how much it's really being put out there, there is COVID testing that's going on currently down at the Coliseum. It is free of charge. It's going to be happening again this Friday and next Wednesday from 9 to 1. Those that have gone through it thus far, and I believe Dr. D will talk about it next week because he's gone through it, it is still a nose swab, free of symptom, or free of charge, yes, without symptoms, Becca. They're doing the nose swabs, but it's not the awful one. It's still in the nose, but they're not going back as far anymore, and they're not twisting as much anymore. He said, you know, it's not nearly as bad as they were in the beginning. So yeah, and we can put this information as well. And if you go on Winthrop's main webpage and Google, you can get this information. This isn't being advertised that well right now. I know I drove by Saturday and they were still doing it and there was really no one there. And it's on the far side of the Coliseum as you go down towards like Cherry Park. The R is reinvesting in the new reality. And Dr. Hamill was talking about this last week as we were preparing for the Health Professionals Committee wrap session for next week. Physical distance doesn't mean social distance. And we keep saying socially distancing. And again, I'm going to go back to Brene with this. And she talks about in her book, Daring Greatly, that connection is why we're here. We are hardwired to connect with others. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. And without it, there is suffering. So just because we have to physically distance right now doesn't mean we have to socially distance. Again, as I've been walking around campus right now, and for myself, as I reinvest and I adjust, I know, thank you, Lexi, I know that it's really important for me to get up and to move my body. The first couple of days that I have been here, I just sat at my desk and went from presentation to meeting to, with Zoom, I feel like things are happening so quickly. I went home that night and I was exhausted and my whole body was really sore from sitting. So I make sure that at least every 2 hours I get up and I just walk part of campus. With my mask on, I get to see people, I get to interact, because sitting here alone in my office all day, it's exhausting. I need to interact with other people. So make sure that you physically distance, you have that 6 feet apart, but you're not socially distancing. Something really fun that I did back with my friends in New York, the CrossFit gym I belong to back in New York, is they did a trivia night. And those were some of us that moved away, and we got to get together through trivia, and we had breakout rooms, and we played trivia online together. It was so much fun. You know, the Zoom calls, it's not the same as being there in person, but still having that interaction with people. You know, through the racial injustices, I have some colleagues up in New York who I was close to and other friends, and we all read Dr. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And we did a book club together, you know, via Zoom. We could have just done it over the phone, but to see each other and talk with each other, that was really, really fulfilling as well. So really think about, how can you physically distance, but not socially distance? I know some of the clubs are starting to come back together. I know for our ACAD students, for freshmen, the virtual organization fair is coming out. Even if you are, I know, Kayla, it does suck for extroverts a little bit, but I know for some of you who are even juniors and seniors, if there are clubs and organizations you've never been involved in before, maybe now is the time to get involved, to see what virtual options, or to see what socially, or rather physically distanced options are available to you when it is so hard to connect right now as well. And then I want to turn it to all of you. What other ways are there that you can physically distance while you're here at WU? Not socially distance. We want to take that out of the vocabulary. But what other ways can you socially connect while physically distancing? Has anyone had anything they've done that's really worked? Group me. Phone calls, FaceTime, DSU events, group FaceTime, yeah, absolutely. I encourage you to, if you're living here on campus, get off campus. Yep, Zoom parties, get off campus. There are so many, the weather is changing. They're saying, everyone keeps telling me after this rain goes through, we're gonna have the most beautiful fall weekend. Get off campus. Thank you, Wendy, for that as well. Get off campus, visit some of the parks, visit some of the greenways, go for walks one another, making conscious efforts to email professors or reach out. Yeah, walks at Winthrop Lake, walks at Glencairn Garden, that's right down here. You know, if you have a hammock, spending more time outside. We're about to be in the most beautiful season, in my opinion, in the fall. Take advantage of that. Can you study outside? Can you study outside with a group of friends? I saw a group of students yesterday that I was just so excited to see, and they were down on the green, you know, socially distanced on blankets, eating to one another. Can you have a socially distanced, you know, picnic together? And I know they did that during Welcome Week for the new students as well. So be creative. With this too, you have to really make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. And I've used this in several presentations because it's been my favorite for a long time, is with this, you have to set boundaries. And as we talked about earlier with the adjustment, as you're readjusting to the semester, every time I have to set a boundary, it stresses me out, but I do it for the same reason. I've been building blanket forts since I was a little kid, to create a safe place for myself. Now that kind of work is at home and home is at work, and that boundary is blurred, and with all the divisiveness that's going around, make sure that you set boundaries, make sure that you're pouring into yourselves so you can pour out to others that you care about in your personal family lives, in your friendship lives, and in the work that you're doing as well. And remember, self-care is just not manicures and pedicures and nails being done. Self-care goes back to Maslow and those hierarchy of needs. Self-care is also eating when you're hungry, sleeping when you're tired, turning off the screen. I don't know about all of you. I have my contacts in today, but I had to get blue light blocker glasses because all of this screen time, I can't. And sometimes at night, I'm not returning emails as I would as often because I've been staring at a screen all day and I just can't look at it any longer. So make sure you're setting boundaries with that work as well as boundaries in relationships. And this is a chart that I've loved through Olga Finas. As you look at self-care, it is what parts do you need to dig in more? Physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional, because these are all of the different pieces of self-care. And be mindful as you go through this semester that grief is not one and done, that you're not just going to go through it. Okay, well, I attended, Sarah's tear wrap session. I'm good now. My grief's under control. I wish grief worked like that. We're going to continue to grieve as the semester goes on. Halloween's going to look different. Thanksgiving's going to look different. Christmas is going to look different. Finals are going to look different. The elections are going to look different. There are many events that are going to happen that grief is going to bubble up and get more intense. So be aware of that. And don't go it alone. There are so many resources here that are available to you. Certainly, even if you're not on campus, the WU Health and Counseling Services, I've had a lot of students who say, you know what, it sucks that I can't go in person, but it's almost better because the access to it, the Zoom, and being able to be in the comfort of my own home or sit in my car or wherever it might be, it fits into my schedule better. If not that, check out the Tao Resource Center. Check out all of the apps that are available on there, meditation, grounding. There's a lot of helpful links on the Counseling Services website. Hospice and community care here locally, if you have a bigger loss that you're navigating, they have bereavement services that are open to anyone free of charge, even if you didn't lose someone through hospice. Also remember, September is National Overdose Awareness Month, and it's National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month as well. So certainly if you are feeling suicidal, if you have friends who are feeling suicidal, please reach out for help. Do not go alone. Know that isolation is a real thing. And a lot of folks are here and want to help, but we can't help if we don't know that you're struggling. And if you're not comfortable reaching out, the crisis text line is a great way to reach out. So I did it again. I overplanned and had way too much. It is 11:59, so I have 1 minute. I am sorry that I raced at the end. I will send out the PowerPoint. I guess if folks want the PowerPoint, I'm not sure what the easiest way to do that is. I'll turn to Lexi for that. Maybe, I'm not sure. But if folks want a copy of the PowerPoint, I can certainly get that to you. I think maybe Lexi will get a link of everyone who attended this session, and maybe in that link we'll have all the emails and I can send it out that way. But any thoughts, questions? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say I'll put my email in the chat, and if they want to email me, they can. I can get it from you.
Perfect, Lexi. Thank you. Any thoughts, questions, any final? I know it is 12 o'clock, so if you have somewhere to be, certainly go ahead. But I do want to stay on just for a second to see if there's any thoughts or questions that I can answer for folks.
Professor Hopkins, let me just say before disappearing, Lexi has placed a link in the chat, and that is to solidify your cultural events credit. So please, Lexi, do you mind posting it again? Copy and pasting it again. So please complete the survey before you leave the chat, because we want you to get credit for attending today. We want to thank Professor Hopkins so much for such a resourceful, such a powerful, such a timely topic. And personally, I've had two takeaways: that vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. I want you to keep that in mind. And secondly, for me to think of physical distance, not social distance. In other words, how can we be creative? And so I hope you have had lots of takeaways from today's session. And like she said, do reach out to folks if you think you need help. Thank you so much for coming. If you have questions for Professor Hopkins, please email her or email Lexi or myself, and we'll definitely route those questions to her. She'll get back to you. But I am just overwhelmed to see so many of you here. It just tells me that the information is timely, or you just want to hang out, you want to see us just beyond just getting the cultural events credit. I think there's more of a desire and a need for such content. And so kudos to all of you for showing up. Guys, continue to take very good care of yourself. I'm going to stop talking in case you have questions for Professor Hopkins. I guess she'll hang out for a little bit, and I'm going to hang out here too. So, and at this point, I'll stop recording in case you have,